The UK must prepare for war and to bring back conscription, warns an ex-NATO commander. We're going to read into this exclusive from the iPaper, you guys. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Reganelite here with an exclusive from the iPaper with the headline that the UK must prepare for war and to bring back conscription, warns the ex-NATO commander. Where the air defence missiles defending London, Manchester, Glasgow, Edinburgh, Cardiff, Belfast and other cities. General Sir Richard Shirreff had told the iPaper. It's true. Where are the air defence missiles? Where is our protection? He's got a point, hasn't he? I mean, here's the thing. Like, I know a lot of people will think, oh, we're not, Russia's far away from us. We don't need to worry about Russia. They're far away from us. And it's just like, really? Just because they're far away from us doesn't mean that they can't get to us. I know that Russia's economy is crippled. I know Russia right now is not in a very good state. But that doesn't mean to say that in 5-10 years' time that they won't be back up to where they was before the Ukraine war. It's entirely possible. I agree that the UK should do more to prepare for war. We should be preparing for any and all possible outcomes. We should be preparing ourselves for anything, including when, when a pandemic drops. We should always have procurements, always have backups, always have these things ready. Now, the conscription one, I know we have, I think it's roughly about 57,000 soldiers. Probably a number will be told in the paper in this article. But it's a very, very low number of soldiers. We have a very significantly reduced amount of soldiers than we used to have. And that number has reduced significantly since 2010 under the Conservatives. It went back up a little bit under Labour, but let's be clear, the Iraq War may have played a factor as well on that, in that as well. But we're not doing enough to encourage people to join the army. That's one thing we're not doing. I've said this before about if they wanted to get more people to join, they need to incentivise them. Now, it's all well and good talking about increasing the defence budget. And yes, I do agree the defence budget needs to be increased. But like everything, how do you pay for it? This is the question. My answer is it should not come out of it should not come out of us, ordinary people. I think, that when it comes to, for me, when we have so many issues in this country, I think the millionaires and billionaires can afford to pay a little bit more of tax. But for some reason, we can't do that for some reason. And it's very, very frustrating indeed. We have had peace for a very, very long time. And since the war in Ukraine, things have gotten heated. And it looks like to me, I think, that it could turn very nasty, especially with what's been happening with recent events with Donald Trump. So we should be ready and prepared. But right now, we are very, very weak as a nation. When it comes to defence, that is something we are definitely weak as. So a former NATO commander believes plans are due to be put forward by Sir Keir Starmer to send fewer than 30,000 European peacekeeper troops to Ukraine aren't credible, and that Britain must prepare for war with Russia. General Sir Richard Shirreff said Russia must be defeated before any peacekeeping mission, but warned Allied powers deploying peacekeeping soldiers should be ready for full-scale state-of-state warfare if Moscow forces attack them. He added the Prime Minister will be laughed out of court by Donald Trump next week when he travels to Washington unless the Prime Minister signals defence spending will rise to at least 3%. The ex-Deputy Supreme Allied Commander of Europe of NATO called on European powers to arm Kiev to defeat Vladimir Putin on the battlefield before any peacekeeping force is deployed. Conscription of around 30,000 Britons a year must be considered to boost the size of the British army, and 100,000, he believes. Although as a professional soldier, he said he hated the idea of conscription, with training to prepare armed forces reservists in the events of the worst case. Where there are air defence missiles defending London, Manchester, Glasgow, Edinburgh, Cardiff, Belfast and other major cities, he had told the paper. Where is the mobilisation of the defence industry? The mobilisation of the national economy to fight a war? This is big stuff. We are really serious. Munich 1938 was a betrayal of Czechoslovakia, but at least it forced Chamberlain to kick off rearmaments. Munich 2025 is set to be a betrayal of Ukraine, but should also be firing a starting gun to prepare Britain and NATO for war with Russia, because that ultimately is the only way we're going to maintain peace. If Trump pulls US troops out of Baltic NATO states, it could embolden Putin to launch further attacks and risk a third world war, he added. The PM is set to unveil the blueprint led by the UK and France for a reassuring force of 30,000 soldiers to Trump next week. But Sir Richard said that while plans to use intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance aircraft, drones and satellites to monitor any border with Russia were a good idea, a lot more soldiers were needed. The only cast iron security guarantee for Ukraine is NATO membership. The next guarantee is really capable troops. A military force with a clear intent that if the Russians will do anything to break a ceasefire, they'll get thumped, he said. I think if you're going to be really pushed to do anything with 30,000, you've got to say, right, this is the nature of the task, this is what is required to do the task. Rather than saying that we can provide what we can provide is 30,000 and therefore let's find a way to make it stretch. I don't think that sounds credible, frankly. Pete Hegseth, the US Defense Secretary, said the sole responsibility for any peacekeeping operations would fall on Europeans and Canada. Trump was credited for the conditions for Putin to win the war, with NATO in danger of being held below the waterline by the US President, said Sir Richard, now a leading geopolitical keynote speaker with the Champion Speakers Agency. And it comes, as the Defense Secretary John Henley said, a ceasefire in Ukraine must not be something that is broken again by Russia reinvading Ukraine. Sir Richard added, all the talk about any ceasefire force, whether you call it implementation or reassurance or whatever, is totally academic unless the Russians are forced to accept it. And so the first step is to say, how do we force the Russians to accept it? Do we defeat the Russians in Ukraine, or do we help the Ukrainians to defeat the Russians in Ukraine? The only hope for long-term peace and security in Europe is if Russia is given a bloody nose in Ukraine and recognises that it will never achieve its aims. In other words, defeating Russia in Ukraine. But this is, I can't see this happening given the situation that we're in now. I just can't see this happening. Long-range missiles with permission to strike deep into Russia, huge caches of ammunition, air defence surveillance, tanks, armoured infantry fighting vehicles, and self-propelled artillery together with drones and satellite surveillance were all needed by Ukraine, Sir Richard said. Speaking on the Jeremy Vine show, Labour MP Pauline Hamilton said that the UK needs to start a serious discussion around conscription. The MP for Birmingham, Errington, said conscription is not something I would have thought about until all of this has blown up. But I do think we need to start the serious discussion about conscription. Because young people are not engaged, but they're going to have to because our borders are being threatened, and you cannot continue to bury your head in the sand. Ministry of Defence spokesperson said, this is purely speculation, as the Prime Minister said after Monday's Paris summit. We are still in the early stages of the process, but Britain will take a leading role in supporting the lasting peace in Ukraine, and that safeguarding its sovereignty will deter Putin from further aggression in the future. But they're not ruling out conscription there. An MP, the MP for Labour MP there, basically saying we should have a discussion about this. And we laughed and we joked about it. Remember when we laughed and joked about it when Richie Sunak brought it up at the general election? Is it still a laughing matter now? Is it something we should really have a serious conversation about? Conscription? Is that something that we should be implementing? I think a lot of people will say no. But then my question is, where do you get the forces, the soldiers that we need? We are heading to something. We don't know what. I don't want to... excuse me. I don't want to say we are going to war. I don't want to say that. I know some people want to say that. But we're certainly... It feels like we're heading in that direction, doesn't it? But Britain should prepare for any and all outcomes. That is for sure. But what do you guys honestly think? Do you think we should bring back conscriptions? Do you think we need to bolster our defences here on this island? Do you agree with him that more needs to be done? Let me know what your thoughts are and more on all of this down in the comment section below. Hit that like button, share across social media, subscribe if you haven't already. Do check out the Patreon and Rumble pages for exclusive content. And if you want to go one step further, there's a join button that's below to join my YouTube membership for as little as 99p. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to catch you all very, very soon.